Welcome to PTSD 911. This is the live recap of our world premiere. So glad you could join us tonight. We have a number of amazing guests coming on in just a minute, but I wanted to first of all just start by saying thank you. Thank you, first of all, for following us on our social pages. Thank you for supporting the film to help us to get to the end zone and getting a film made. That was huge. Thank you for sharing it with your friends and colleagues and family and enemies and anybody else that you shared it with. I really appreciate that. And I just have to say that I'm just blown away by the amazing, amazing night we had last week. Almost a week now. Wow, this is Wednesday, and Wednesday a week ago I was in Texas, and we were getting ready for the world premiere. And I want to bring on a few people right now who had a big part in the film. First, I want to bring on is Nancy Froman. Nancy is a filmmaker in her own right and was a part of this project from the very beginning. She said yes to participating in the film as a producer, and so glad that Nancy, thank you for joining me. I think you're still muted there. If you can uncheck that box. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, Conrad. How are you a week out?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. It's been a crazy week since the premiere, just to kind of reset my brain, reset my life. Uh, my wife and I had a few days in Dallas after the event, so that was nice. But I want to say, first of all, thank you for saying yes to participating in the film and being a part of the production. I really appreciate that. And I know a lot of people that were a part of the film had a conversation with you early on. If you could just share with people briefly about what your role was.
Yeah, first of all, the gratitude is on my part, Conrad. When you called me and said, let's have a cup of coffee and talk about this project I'm thinking about doing, I had no idea it would take us to this point. And I'm so grateful to you for bringing me on board, because what I love to do is documentaries that are impactful and touch people in a really human way and at their hearts. And that's what this film does. So it also opened my eyes to a subject matter that I was not intimately familiar with. And it's really, really, really important. This is a film that is going to have just huge repercussions in a really positive way. So I'm really grateful for that. So when we talked about working together and collaborating, the first thing you asked me is, what are your strengths? What do you bring to a project? And I said, I think I'm a pretty good storyteller. And you said, that's great, because, that will complement my strengths. And what I found out was that you are an exceptional storyteller. And I almost feel that I do feel you guided and directed the process here in a way that enabled me to have a really easy role. There were times when I put a lot of time in, and it wasn't always easy. And sometimes we were very frustrated in what we were doing, but it was your guidance and your vision that helped make it my role easier. And so it was tracking people down, talking with people, hearing their stories. There's so many people that came out of the woodwork who so much wanted to tell their stories, their experiences with trauma, with PTSD, with the impact of those experiences on their jobs, and the negative impacts on their jobs, and how it took them to sometimes very dark places.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that was hard. It was really hard to remain dispassionate and distanced from that in a way that didn't make it harder to do the work. But the people that we met along the way were extraordinary. The people whose stories are not in the film, the people who are doing incredible work. Kathy Sullivan is one that comes to mind with with Ashes to Arts. The people really made this project worthwhile. and them wanting us to tell their stories, as intimate and as difficult as it was for them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
They still wanted us to tell their stories because the impact that it will have on their first responder communities is worth it to them. So it was worth it to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the work you did at just, vetting some of these stories. And, sometimes we had to go through stories and say, okay, is this a real story that we want to include? Or is it someone who, wants their 15 minutes? And they were both. And so we had to kind of, wade through those challenges. And you did a great job with that. And I think what we landed on, were the right people. And there were so many stories, like you said, that we wish we could have included.
Yeah.
And there's only so many minutes in a film that you can't, would have a 20-part miniseries or maxi series,
Right.
if we want to tell every story. So that was a challenge. So thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate that. I want you to hang out here. I'm going to bring on Todd and his wife. And I want to say this, that Todd and Becky, you guys were the best dressed of the night. And I want to bring up this picture because I want to show it to everybody. If you missed the world premiere, this is Todd and Becky. I think truly they were the best dressed of the night, and so I just want to say congratulations for
Thank you.
So Todd, tell us a little bit about who you guys are. Becky, tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit your role in the film.
Okay, well, first I wanted to, on the best dressed thing, I got to give some props to our friend Isaac Padilla. He's got a lot more fashion sense than me. So when I was like, hey, I didn't want to just wear a gray suit, Becky was kind of like almost live streaming him. We were there buying it, and he was telling me what to coordinate and all. So I got to give Isaac some credit there.
Well, kudos to him. So.
My name's Todd Geary. I've been a Aguilar police officer for 20 years. I spent 16 and a half years in patrol. And then the last 3.5 or so, I'm in our wellness unit at the Aguilar Police Department.
My name is Becky Aguilar. I am Todd's partner. We've been together 10 years. So I guess I have been a first responder, significant other spouse for 10 of his 20 years. I also work in nonprofit in trauma-related fields. So for the past decade, I've worked largely with sexual assault survivors, both adults and children, in fundraising capacity, working with volunteer victim advocates who are working with the victims themselves, and currently work at a nonprofit here in North Texas called Trauma Support Services, and we provide no-cost therapy for crime victims. And we also are working on a training program that trains any first responders and therapists who are in their own way first responders, how to work with women that have been victimized, domestic violence, sexual assault, et cetera. So between us in our 10 years, we have a fair amount of work-related trauma between us that I think
you guys go see therapists yourselves?
Yeah, I have also the blessing of having a lot of friends that are therapists. And so I know that is not exactly the same as seeing a therapist, but yes, we've both been in therapy. We know the importance of therapy. And we're so grateful for the work that both you and Nancy have done on this film to kind of bring an issue that, as we're learning now, even people in the field were like, I didn't realize this. And so, you know, you go to work every day and it builds and it builds and it builds. And then one day you're like, oh, wow, we're not normal.
Yeah. So I want to ask all three of you, just now that you've seen the film, some of you have seen the film multiple times, what stands out to you that is impactful?
Well, I guess I'll go first because nobody jumped on that. I think the whole thing was impactful. You guys were talking a little bit earlier about how many stories there are to tell. And I believe in the whirlwind right after the film and the few kind of minutes that I got to talk to you, Conrad, my first impression was I wanted more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to see more about the types of programs and what's out there to help our first responders. I'm very grateful that the way that the film was produced, you kind of get to know a little bit of what's happening with our three main folks in their journey. And obviously that's going to be an ongoing journey for them. There's not a conclusion. But I appreciated that, like, there was, that slice of hope. But I think, I don't even hate the idea of a 20-part maxi series. Like, let's learn more and what therapy works for what kind of person, and getting into, like, sometimes you get a therapist and that doesn't work and it's okay to try something else. And it's like dating, that kind of thing. So I think it was even knowing what a little bit of what the movie was going to be about prior because of Todd's involvement, and knowing what I already was aware of first responder trauma and my own, vicarious and secondary trauma from my own work. I wanted more.
Awesome. Well, that's then I think I've done my job. When if we can leave the audience, I never want to leave the audience saying, when is this over? Is it done yet? I want to leave them wanting more. And so I think that's one thing we accomplished. Nancy, what are your thoughts? What are your big takeaways?
So it's so interesting that you use the word impact or impactful, because I've been thinking about this, knowing that we were going to be doing this event tonight. And I was thinking, the first thing I want to say is that this is an impact documentary. And I think the premiere really solidified that. There seemed to be truly a universal appreciation for the messaging. But here's the thing that's so important and why it's impactful and what's so valuable about this documentary is that outside of the obvious, it's also, and I think what Becky just said is it is a human interest story. It's about real people revealing their humanity and their vulnerability and they're everyday heroes, but they have everyday vulnerabilities. It's just more magnified for them. So their struggles may not be everybody's struggles, but we all have the ability to be sympathetic and understanding. And that's what we need to take away from this film. And the average moviegoer, like the lay person in the audience, will learn from this film. And I fervently believe that it will change public perception of our first responders, what they go through, what their needs are, who they are as human beings. Actually, a friend of mine I was with yesterday was asking me about the premiere and about the film. And I was trying to explain this to her. And she said, wow, I never thought about first responders in that way. They're just these people out there who respond to our emergencies. I never thought about them because I don't know anybody in my own personal life, this is what she said, who's a first responder. And I said, so take your vulnerabilities and take your the traumas that you've experienced in your life. Maybe you've had one or two, maybe you've had three, and magnify that, multiply that by the tens. That's what these people have experienced in their adult lives. And she said, wow, that I never thought about it like that. That's what this film will do. Yeah. Apart from the obvious, apart from highlighting, the programs that may work or don't work, what first responders, agencies, and departments are or are not doing for them, right? Because that's part of the story, right? We need to highlight that. We need to influence change here. But it's also bringing awareness. And I think that in a huge, huge way, that's what this film will do. But again, it's not just that. There is this human interest component. So the layperson will watch this film and say, wow, this is a story about people. They're real people. And these people could be my neighbor. And I don't even know them. So I think that that's one of the most significant impacts that will come out of watching this film.
Yeah. I want to pitch it over to Todd, but I just want to give everyone a heads up. We have some other guests in the wings, so stay tuned. We got some really amazing guests coming up as well. So, Todd, what are your big takeaways from the film and from the event on Thursday night?
I think to kind of answer your previous question too, that I didn't get to, my part in the film was originally, saw the first trailer somewhere. I think it was on Blue Help's Facebook, but I'm not sure now. And I must have watched that first trailer you put out about like 7 or 8 times back to back when I first saw it. So it had a huge impact. The theme of that word going around now, it had a huge impact on me. And I just reached out to you. You responded right away. I was really impressed by that because I didn't have a title CEO or chief or sheriff next to my name, and I didn't have NYPD or Chicago PD next to my name. And you reached back out, asked if I wanted to be advisor. And then I was just really motivated to assist you and the filmmakers you and Nancy any way possible. So I just kind of wanted to bombard you with ideas and content so you could sift through and see what you thought, because you're the storyteller. I'm definitely not, and see what you thought would be good. So that's how I got involved. And then being associate producer is very humbling and not something that I was thinking about or anything of that.
Well, I just have to say to everyone watching that, I gave Todd that credit because he did so much for the film behind the scenes that wouldn't have happened if he wouldn't have been around and kind of really sometimes beating the bushes, for stories and for resources and for things. And so, I mean, you well deserve that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. But like to answer this question now about, so for me, it's just super, super impactful. The film and being at the premiere just far exceeded my expectations. The storytelling was really, really riveting. Many first responders, including myself, that were at the premiere had some, visceral reactions, heart rate going up, had to do some belly breathing to get back down from connecting with the characters, big time. And then I was trying to be take notice of who I was going to invite to the premiere. And I wanted to make sure I invited some non-first responders because I really wanted to value their feedback. So I was really being conscious of that. And I invited one of my colleagues from Garland that actually works at a behavioral health hospital. His name's Corey, but he's on the business side. And they do things to support first responders. And, they'll buy breakfast for the entire patrol shift. They'll host ice cream socials to come out and stuff. But he saw it and told me that it was just a humbling experience for him, super informative. It was really moving for him, really put a human perspective on first responders. And then he said he even admits that he was guilty of not actually seeing himself in years past, that he thinks the film is just going to be an essential medium for awareness for the general public, to get a little peek inside of what's going on and what you asked your first responder to do, and then what we can do to try and support them and mitigate that so they can live healthier and happier lives and then serve the community at a much higher level. Mm-hmm. So I could keep going. It's what you and Nancy and what your team put together, super, super impressive. Going to be a super good training tool for first responders. I'm so excited about that. I've been using the trailer, like I've told you, I've been using the trailer for a couple of years now. And just that 6 minutes is very, very impactful for training.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you for all you've done. And for all three of you, thank you for your work and for your commitment and your support for this film. And we have a lot of people coming on tonight, so I want to move on. I hate to rush, but I want to move on. And so thank you for joining. If you want to jump back in toward the end of the show, like after the top of the hour, would love to have you come back and we'll do a wrap up with everyone then. But right now, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys temporarily, and then we're going to bring in the one and only Samantha Horwitz. Welcome to the program tonight.
Hey, Conrad, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Since you launched this incredible project right here in my backyard, in Todd's backyard, up in Irving, it has been nonstop. It's what we've been talking about because it's in the passion of what we do. And at a badge of honor, we are 100% invested in the resiliency and our wellness of our first responders. From wearing badges myself in 2 different departments, and my partners as well in a badge of honor, being partnered with Garland Police Department. They are huge supporters and backers of us, as are you, Conrad. And I like to say that our family went big time last week. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you coming to the program on Thursday night and being a part of that. I just want to get your thoughts on that evening. What were your takeaways?
Well, first of all, I mean, it is the movie was intense, very impactful. You could, I'll speak for myself. I could feel the stories that you and Nancy highlighted. These first responders. I got their frustration because I've been there myself. So a little bit of a stress response for me, just to employ some of the breathing tactics that we teach in our workshops, and to have my husband, who's not a first responder, and my mom, who definitely is not a first responder. She supported me my whole career. To have them with me to really get an understanding of, like, this is what we go through. The trauma is real. There needs to be more of a light shed on. I wish that it was actually longer, and went a little bit deeper into the stories. But I think you guys captured this, where it's an understanding that the general public would get. It's like, oh, well, we kind of knew that they, our first responders are out there doing some tough stuff, but not like this.
Yeah.
Not like this.
And I think that's one of the things we want to do with our 3 goals. Our first goal is to raise awareness, to really help the general public understand the depth of what first responders experience. And to your point as to, you wish it were longer. Well, there's many parts of these stories that we told that we couldn't tell, that we didn't have time for. And because the story, as someone alluded to earlier, the story continues. The journey of wellness and mental health continues for all of our subjects. And so there are elements of all of their stories that we left behind just because we didn't have time to tell them. And that's hard. And as a filmmaker, that's always a challenge, to be able to, cut that down to the essentials of what this particular project wants to do. And I think part of what we want to do moving forward, and I'll talk about this a little more in depth a little bit later, is we want to create tools for first responders. And some of those things that perhaps were left on the cutting room floor will be used as part of those tools to help further the story, to help enlighten people in a deeper way.
Well, that would be fantastic. We play in, so many of us in the theater, we play in the same sandbox, really wanting to be resources for first responders. And, for the first responders, you couldn't tell how much brass, but by that I mean higher ups, were in the audience, because people were wearing suits, and it was really cool to get dressed up and stuff. But I hope it's a swift kick in the butt, because we have seen for the past, 3, 4, 5 years, states, Texas being one of them, the politicians pass these laws that say, oh, we have this first responder law now, and first responders are going to get the help that they need. They can reach out. And when you're on the other side of the coin working with first responders, it's like, no, it's not like that at all. We still have a lot of pushback. Many of us, it's like, what would you like us to do? How would you like us to assist you? Sure, money is part of it, but we have to take that out of the equation. And these laws that are being passed are not helping the situation. They're frankly smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I've heard it say already that, well, we have EAP.
Yeah.
Okay. Who doesn't?
That was a verb that you did not want to go to EAP when you were in the department that I was with. No, that was not a good thing.
No, I mean, not saying that there are some EAPs that actually do their job and do it right, but that's kind of the standard answer. But, I think what we tried to portray in this film, that it needs to be a culture. It needs to be a culture of wellness within an agency, and that permeates everything. And it's not just this thing over here that is available for someone who may or may not choose to go do it, but it's a culture of the thinking of, what am I doing on my daily practice to stay healthy? What am I doing to help my fellow, first responder to be healthy? What, as a leader, and I think that Chief Brian, in fact, I'm going to play a clip from Chief Brian here in a little bit and get some response from some of you guys. What is the culture that is being portrayed in an agency? How are those leaders, leading that culture? Is it a culture of not so wellness, or is it a culture of truly wellness?
I think that's a great point. And I think it just depends on what department you're in. Chief Neil Gang, Pinole PD. It was great to see him in the documentary. He is an advocate for changing organizations, and that's exactly what we need to do. So to have his message be in the film was key, because if you're a leader, you're leading an organization. You want a healthy organization, you got to have healthy troops. And that takes you being open, honest, and vulnerable and engaged as a leader, so that everybody can see, okay, if my chief, if my lieutenant, if my sergeant, if they're all speaking openly about this, and then it's followed up with the resources. It's no longer the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, right? And that's where we create the culture of change organizationally, and it's really about time that it really happens.
It was really cool. On Thursday, we had a bunch of people get together for lunch, and it was at a local restaurant there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there was people from all involved with the film in one way or another, and supporters of the film, and it was just really cool to see the conversations going along. And I heard someone say, 5 years ago, this would never have happened. 5 years ago, these conversations would never have taken place. And I thought, how sad is that even a short time as, what is this, 2022, short time as 2017, these conversations would not have happened.
Well, and you got to look back and say, maybe if they did happen, 2019 wouldn't have been the worst year for first responder suicides. It's always, we as a culture are very reactionary. What your film did is, I mean, it opened the can, the proverbial can, right?
Good. I hope it does. And I hope
it's a good can, because it's not hidden anymore. We've got to talk about this more. We've got to bring post-traumatic stress and the tough conversations into our four walls of our departments, because to have an officer have to fight to get help and then be penalized when the department says, okay, yeah, go get help. No.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's sad that it's taken this long to get to this place. And how many people have we lost because of that type of a mentality? We've lost hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yes.
because of that. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for being a supporter of the film and for just all you've done to help raise the story of this film. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
Well, you're welcome, Conrad, and thank you for what you do. Fight. We still got to keep fighting.
Absolutely. We're going to bring a few more guests on, but first I'm going to say goodbye to Samantha for now. If you can stick around till later, that'd be great. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the event of the evening. I want to share that we had an amazing event. We had almost a little over 400 people at the premiere, and we had Lighthouse Health and Wellness was our presenting sponsor. And I just want to give a shout out to Joe and his team. They did an amazing job in supporting this film and supporting the event. We couldn't have done this amazing premiere without these guys. We also had some other amazing sponsors. Our reception sponsors were the Garland Police Association, First Responder Stress and Trauma, Tactical Resiliency Training, and we'll hear from Dr. Phil Becky in just a minute. Garland Emergency Corps and NAMI Texas were all part of the reception sponsors, and the projection sponsors. We had to pay for a big projector to project this thing, and so these guys helped with that. Encore Recyclers and To the Rescue Life-Saving Training. These guys all pitched in money to help with this, and we had just an amazing team. Dr. Athena Trenton from NAMI North Texas. They were NAMI North Texas was the host of the event, and Dr. Trenton and her team did an amazing job of just putting a lot of things together. So thank you for that. Richard Barton from ICISF was our MC. Thank you, Richard, for kind of keeping the wheels rolling there for the evening. And we had our Q&A sponsor was Hule Law, Lisa Hule out of LA. She's amazing, and she sponsored the Q&A. And our Q&A MC, who does not love Tom Morris Jr.? He was amazing, just a sharp-dressed man, and just fantastic, a great friend. And our panelist, Diane Bernhard from COPS, Captain J.D. Shulgin from Garland Fire and Rescue, Sherry Martin from National FOP, Mark DeBona, retired law enforcement officer, Monica Million, the past president of NINA, Dr. Phil Becky, owner of Wellness Centers USA. We'll hear from him in just a second. And Officer Todd Geary from Garland PD. This was an all-star panel of commentators on our Q&A. So thanks to all of them for being a part of this. And so speaking of Dr. Phil, as we call him, welcome to the program. And we have Maddie waiting in the wings too. In fact, I'm going to bring Maddie onto the thing tonight. Maddie, welcome to the program tonight as well. Both of you, thank you for being a part of this film. Both of you played an integral role in the film. And Maddie, it was, your story that we told in this film, and Phil was your expertise that we relied on to kind of decipher what we're seeing. So welcome.
Hi.
Thank you.
So how are you guys doing?
Go ahead, Dr. Phil.
I was going to say, go ahead for you, Maddie. Well, yeah, you're doing great. I'm just woke up this morning, so that was a good thing, and just glad to be here. So just glad to be here. Thanks for having us on, Conrad. How are you, Maddie?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. I'm having a pretty busy day. It's been busy since I came back from Texas, and a lot of good stuff.
So both of you, you participated in the film. You participated in the festivities of that day. What are your takeaways from last Thursday?
Man, it was amazing. It went by really quickly.
Yeah.
But I was so moved by how many people showed up, and just like all the comments that people were, and all the conversations people were having with me afterwards. It was, just that alone, just that premiere alone really made it all worth it, to put myself out there the way I did. I was really nervous, and it was really good to have the rest of the folks and you, Conrad, and your family, and Dr. Phil and Tom and everybody in the house together. That was so cool, to be able to support each other in that way. But yeah, it was like, some of the people coming up to me afterwards with like tears in their eyes, like, wow, like, thank you. And man, it just made it all worth it. And I just think about how, as this film gets, put out into the world, how much of an impact it's going to have on, countries and first responders and getting the help that they need. Cause that's why I do it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Phil, what was your takeaway from that day and from that event?
Yeah, I concur. I think Matt's spot on. Having everyone together, I think, was powerful. Having a room of first responders. I remember at one point there, I think it was you, Conrad, asked for a raise of hands of folks who were first responders, and just to see all of those hands go up throughout the auditorium and recognize, wow, there's a lot of folks that are saying me too's to a lot of this content. And just recognizing that this is the start of a tidal wave of what's going to push forward from here with this documentary, with the vulnerability of Maddie and Nicole and Desiree and the other folks that were involved, who were just so brutally raw and honest with their struggles with PTSD. I thought that was just a testimony to the way in which Conrad, they obviously had a great deal of trust in you to be able to feel comfortable to share these things, especially on camera, knowing that this is going to go out, as Maddie said, not just nationwide, but internationally too.
Yeah. I really think that having people together, it was amazing. I concur with both of you guys. I want to show you this picture. I want to bring this up on the screen. So this was a number of the people involved in the film, and Tom Morris is there as well on the red carpet. And of course we have the four-legged friend, Maddie. That is, tell us a story about your service dog there, Maddie.
Oh, that's Axl Rose.
I love that name, Axl Rose.
This is actually the better, more healthy version, to be quite honest. But yeah, he's my service dog, and it was so cool to be able to bring him out there too, and just, not just for myself, but for Nicole and for Desiree and for everybody else in the house. There's something about him that, really grounds people when they're feeling upset, and he, innately knows how to, go to people when they're, when they're feeling a little bit anxious or whatever. So there he is, and handsome guy, he's sitting there all regal, but that was great to have him there.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to have him there, and it was great to be together, like you said. And I know Phil wasn't part of the house, but we had actually rented an Airbnb for a lot of the folks that were in the film, the primary subjects, and it was just, I think it was a good move to all be together, because it really built some camaraderie and some just some fellowship, and I think that was really important. I want to play this clip as part of the film. And it's a thing that Chief Brian says in one of his lines. I want to play it, and then I want you both to react to this.
Come in, they're young, they're energetic, they want to save the world, and you watch them over time, and you see it. You see them gain weight. You see them, they're now in a divorce. They're on medication for high blood pressure. They can't sleep at night, and you can see this, and you see it time and time again. And once I understood that this job is causing that putting them in that environment day after day is causing that, I have an obligation, to see if we can fix that or if we can treat that.
Speaking to leadership. So Maddie, you're in the fire services,
right,
and Phil, you were in law enforcement. I want you to both to speak to that from your perspectives.
Yeah, we need leadership that has that perspective. We need leadership that is going to spend more time and money on their people rather than their equipment. I mean, it's out of control right now, at least in the fire service. I know, law enforement has been doing peer support and this kind of support for a lot longer than we have. And we're trying to play catch up, and we're understaffed, just like, law enforcement is now, and we work 24-hour shifts. So understaffed for, the fire department can mean 5 days at work when you were only intending to go in for one. And then you're at a busy house where you're up all night. So to have leadership that understands the signs and symptoms of burnout, fatigue, post-traumatic stress, and be able to address it in the early stages with more wellness programs, so that it doesn't get to the point where people are having to take time off work. And we have a lot of catch up to do, but he's spot on, and we need leadership that understands that. And it seems like this, in my opinion, we have a lot of boots on the ground that are leading the charge at this whole wellness thing, and very few higher ups, right? And they have to answer to municipalities and to risk managers and to HR, and that's a whole different battle in itself. Workers' comp. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we need more leaders like that.
Yeah, that's interesting, Maddie. I concur. I really agree with you. And I was only in law enforcement a short time, but in what I observed and was part of just the toxicity that's involved amongst first responders due to that whole perspective of mental health, wellness, having such a stigma surrounding it, and seeing a chief like this that is getting it and is of a new generation that recognizes and realizes the need to invest in to the officers when it comes to their cognitive well-being is outstanding, and obviously we need more of that, and we're getting more of that as guys are coming up through the ranks. But one thing to speak into that I find interesting in what he was saying was recognizing the actual thing he's talking about there is the way toxic stress plays itself out in the professions of first responders. And this is the main area I think that we need to be focusing on, because a lot of the time, within first responder worlds, we have peer support programs, which are fabulous and are needed, and folks standing by for quick reaction forces, for CERT teams and whatnot when critical incidences do happen. But what we're doing with that is we're just cleaning up the messes after they've happened. We're not actually helping to prepare the officers and the firefighters and the dispatchers and the other first responders with ways in which to know how to respond and react to traumatic incidences, or to critical incidences rather. And so catching that on the front end, I think, is where we need to focus on when it does come to the wellness of recognizing, of helping our first responders understand what it means to get triggered, and what does that look like for me individually? What filters am I using in regards to my temperament, my personality? How does my past experiences play into who I am now and what I'm experiencing in a critical incident? And I think if we're able to provide some of these tools and techniques for our first responders on the front end, before they even experience critical incidences, I think we're going to go a long way to be able to have opportunity to have longevity and a lack of burnout and lower rates of PTSD, and most importantly, a massive reduction in suicide within first responders.
So, Maddie, you're thinking of a film like this and telling a story, telling your story, and sitting in front of a camera, and I heard from several people that appear in this film who said this. Does telling your story again and again, does it start the healing process? Does it help with that? What's your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it just depends on where I'm at in my own recovery. Obviously I was out doing a lot of that, and it on certain days it would take a lot out of me, but I had such a good daily practice, and I understood the value of self-care and what self-care looks like, and I would take the time for myself to wind down, to go to the beach, to go surf, to go, to set time aside for myself, in my own recovery, to, off gas some of that stuff. So, I mean, it absolutely does. you got to let it out, right? And the doc knows, like, if you don't present somebody, if someone's not present and they're still way up here and they're talking about their story, you're just re-traumatizing them, right, doc? I mean, so I had to do it. I had to do a lot of work on myself, but it did feel better to tell my story, especially when I was done and people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Me too. How do I get the help? Can I call you later? Can you teach me how to meditate? Like, how did you do it?" Then it's like, then the gifts start coming, and that's, it's just the healing peer to peer comes from working with others, and so it's very healing. But if you're going to go out there and do it, on a regular basis, it's important that you have a good self-care program.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Becky, why do you think that is the case? When if you are at ready and at the right place, why does that help bring healing?
I think it helps bring healing because when we connect with another human being, we resonate with our sense of meaning and our value within who we are, because I believe it's intrinsically built into us, whether that's either by God, if you believe in God, or from an evolutionary process, if you don't believe in God, whatever that may look like, it's the same thing. And to me, it's that great need to be able to find that sense of connection. And, in the post documentary panel that we had, I shared briefly about that in regards to the way in which, the word in Greek for person is persona, which is where the word person comes from, and it means to face another, this. And that connection that Maddie was talking about is powerful, because it's not only speaking into someone else's life, but in doing so actually can be very healing for us too, as opposed to the opposite of that, which is to be individual, to be separated from others. And the word individual has the same root word in Latin as the word idiot. And we think of the village idiot back in the medieval times, who was disconnected and sort of ostracized from communities. Or you go back to the early Greek times, or the biblical times, when there was, folks living in pig pens or the graveyards and living on their own. We might look at that and in the Bible, it talks about them being demon possessed, and maybe that was the case, or maybe they had mental illnesses, but there was an inability to connect with others. And when that happens, we lose our sense of self. And Maddie, you can testify to this, I know, when it comes to that place of feeling suicidal, because we feel so alone, we feel so lonely, we feel like no one gets me, we feel so isolated and disconnected, and taking our lives seems like the best thing to do. With a rational, calm, centered mind, we look at ourselves and we go, this doesn't make any sense. And I think that happens because we isolate ourselves from who we really are, because we find out who we really are only in the beauty of relationship and in the context of facing another and seeing someone else and feeling seen and feeling known and being heard. And that's what really matters.
And that's, from my observations of working on this, that's hard to do when you're in such a dark place. Maddie, how do you pull yourself up and getting to that place where you can be in that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, thank God I built a picket fence around me. I got vulnerable with people that were doing the work, and what I like to always say is, thank God we're not all crazy on the same day, because we, I had so many good men and women in my life that they did not give up on me. When I gave up on myself, they didn't give up on me, and they were there for me, and they just, that's important. It's important to, in the good times, make sure you have a really good group of people that you are honest with, that you can call up and say, I'm having a bad day, and they're there for you, and you do the same for them, and so when I was in that place, I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for some of my best friends, like the last year, I've depended on, my close friends, and they've taken care of me,
So how important is it to do the work? Back when I was working on my previous film about the opioid crisis, I interviewed a ton of people, hung out with a lot of people in recovery. And a theme that kept coming up over and over again was like, it's hard being in addiction. That's hard. And it's hard being in recovery. You have to choose your hard.
Yeah. It's, I not only have PTSD, but I have a disease, alcoholism, and the cure, which there is none for, but a daily reprieve is me, doing the work, going to the meetings, being part of the fellowship, checking with my sponsor, working the steps, like that, and then having a therapist. And it's a lot of work, but it's worth it because I get to live my life and be my best self and be my authentic self. And in some ways, I just have to view it as a gift. It's a gift because I know where to go. I know what to do. And I don't have to live like that.
Doc, how do you get someone, you have a client who is not quite there yet, ready to do the work. How do you get them to do the work?
Well, that's a $1 million question there, Conrad. Well, here's what I like to do when I'm working with someone who's struggling with this is to draw a timeline of their life. And if this is when we're born, and if this is when we die, let's say we're here in the middle. Well, this is the now, right? And we're lineal. We are bound to time. We can't escape it. We're stuck with it. In fact, we've got a timeline here right now with this podcast, right? It's gonna end soon. Everything we do functions around time, and so we are dependent upon it. But what happens is that if I'm unable to remain where I am, which is right now in my moment, I'm going to get stuck on the past. I'm going to get stuck on failures. I'm going to get stuck on things that have happened to me, maybe out of my control, that weren't my fault, but that cause a lot of trauma for me. Or maybe things I did do that I regret and I live over and over and over again in my mind. Or maybe fast forward onto this side over here where I'm dealing with anxiety about fear of the future because maybe of all the things that have happened back here in the past. And so there's this craziness going on that I never actually get the opportunity to be me and to live where I actually am, which is right now. And so being able to help someone see, to stop that spinning of the past and of the future and of the fear of the failure and of the fear of the anxiety of what's to come yet, and to go, hang on, I'm right here right now. How can I learn just to focus on who I am and recognize that my thoughts are not me? That as Dr. Susan David talks about this, that I'm the thinker of my thoughts. And being able to have that sense of separation just long enough to be able to pay attention to the fact that my thoughts don't have to dominate me. My emotions and feelings don't have to dominate me. I've actually got the ability to have the control and the power to stop some of this stuff. And so being able to stay present in the moment is the best place to start, of recognizing, getting caught up on my past or my future. And that's kind of where I like to start.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to continue this conversation, and we could probably talk for hours about this. We have a few more people to join us, but first, I want to give everybody a heads up that in a few minutes, I'm going to give a kind of a wrap up of where we're going from here of this film, what's next with the film. So if you're watching and wondering, where can I see this? What's next? Hang on, we're going to get there. So I'm going to say a soft goodbye to these two, and I'm going to bring in our friend Dan Jarvis. Dan, if you are available, we will bring you on. I see he stepped away from the camera for a minute, but we'll bring him on. So I'm going to put you guys back in the green room. And I have to say this, that in telling a story of this magnitude, telling any story, to have people sit down in front of a camera and share the deepest, darkest moments of their life is a really challenging thing, and I take it very seriously. And I'm so thankful for everyone who was willing to do that. And I'm also thankful for my next guest, because he brought a piece to the story that was pretty incredible. I want to welcome Dan Jarvis to the program.
Next? Hang on, we're going to get there. So
Dan, I'm getting a feedback loop from you. So
a soft goodbye to these.
Welcome to the show. Dan, you are on. Can you hear me? Dan, can you hear me? Hello? I think he's a little delayed, ladies and gentlemen. So Dan, if you're there, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. I'm not sure he's not hearing me. So we're going to let him figure that out. I think he might be a little delayed. Dan, if you are hearing me, give me a thumbs up there. Hello, Dan. All right, I'm going to come back to you, Dan, in just a minute. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening next. I'm going to add this little thing here. So coming up this coming summer, this is kind of part 2, maybe part 3 of our film. We are going on a bike and film tour across the country. Some of you have heard about this, and we're going to start in Astoria, Oregon, and ride bikes all the way to Ocean City, Maryland. Here's a list of the cities. You probably can't see them very well, but there's about 60 cities that we're going to stop in. And about 25 of those we're actually doing major screening events. And we'll have all this available on our website very soon. But if you go to our website, you can check out more information about this. We are offering sponsorship opportunities for people who want to support us in bringing this film across the country. There's all kinds of cool things that how you can sponsor this and be a part of the film tour. And so we'll have that available on our website very soon. But so just want to let you know that go and check out the cities, because we might be coming to a city near you. And if one of those cities is not in your area, we encourage you to go to our website, fill out a screening information form, and we will bring the film to your city. We've got right now, I just checked a little before we came on the air, we have nearly 60 people that have submitted on that form for screening events. 60. As far away as Australia, as close as just down the road from here where I live in Maryland. And we have someone in Iceland wants the film. So it's amazing. And so we can't wait to bring this film. So if you want to bring it to your community, and we're going to start these screening events in February. If you want to bring this film to your community, please go to our website, PTSD911.com. I'm going to throw this up on the screen here. Go to that URL and fill out the form. And my assistant will contact you and let you know how you can bring the film to your community. We also have a possibility, a little spoiler alert here, possibility that it may be coming to theaters in the US. So that we're working on that. We're waiting for approval. And if that happens, we'll let you know where you can see it in theaters across the US. But we're also coming to some bigger events, coming to some conferences and some larger scale events like that as well. And then it will also be available to you individually, agencies individually. And then finally, later next year, it will be available on the streamers like Amazon. And so it'll be widely available to everyone. So there's a process. Be patient with us. It's a long process. We're also developing a digital toolkit for agencies to use that has the film, that has a lot of other resources around that. And we're working on that diligently to present to the world. And we'll have that available shortly. It's not available yet, but it'll be available sometime in the near future. So I'm going to take this back off the screen here, and we're going to bring in Dan Jarvis. Dan, hopefully you can hear me. Dan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you, man. How you doing?
Good. We had you on earlier, and I guess you weren't hearing us or something. So
yeah, had a little audio technical difficulties. That's me and technology.
Okay. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Hey, Conrad, all I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for telling a story that is so long overdue and needs to be told. It was a great premiere. I was very moved by it. I have a lot of empathy for people, and I could feel the emotions in their stories. And to know that that struggle is real as you or I am. And America needs to realize what we're asking our sons and daughters to do and experience is a lot.
Yeah. And so you've been down that road. You've had those experiences.
Yep. I worked law enforcement for about 7 years, but most of the stuff that I endured was combat from military service. So yeah, I was in those dark spots. I was looking down the barrel of a rifle at one point in early March 2013. So I know exactly the feelings that these men and women have been feeling. It's not a good spot to be in. I could tell you that right now.
Yeah. So you attended the premiere, and thank you for coming. Thank you for making the effort to come out there. And you also had you're a sponsor in the film, and you had a part in telling part of the story there, and some of the work that you're doing, the important work you're doing with 220. Talk just briefly about that and how that is impacting people's lives.
So with 220, what we're doing is we're training veterans and first responders to do peer support and to teach them neurological interventions that will disconnect emotions attached to trauma. So it doesn't matter what level of trauma it is. Doesn't matter if it's combat or if it was a car crash or childhood sexual trauma. You can neurologically disconnect the emotions that are attached to those old events. And what that does is that forces the brain to reconsolidate the memories. So they move out of the amygdala and back into the hippocampus. The emotions will move into the hippocampus. The memories will go long term. And it'll allow the brain to go what's called parasympathetic. It'll come out of fight or flight, and they'll start hitting their REM sleep cycles. And eventually the brain will process out those emotions the way the brain was intended to do. We do a separate process for emotions. So like maybe it's survivor guilt or anxiety. And that's really based on framing. I know Dr. Phil hit a little bit about our perceptions and what we believe. A lot of times, some of those emotions are established very early in childhood. And then next thing you know, you have a neurological pathway that's established and then a trigger that occurs that causes an emotion to activate, and you're reacting based on that emotion. So, maybe somebody has an anger problem, but they had an angry dad or an angry mom at home, and that's what that's the behavior they modeled, and then subconsciously that became their triggers. And I would say for the first responders that we work with, many of them have a lot of adverse childhood experiences. We tend to gravitate towards the profession because we want to be that sheepdog to protect people from maybe some of the things that we had to experience. That was certainly my case. I joined the military and then I became a police officer because I didn't want anybody to have to endure what I went through, even at the age of 11, because 27 months deployed, 7 years in law enforcement paled in comparison to the childhood stuff. So yeah, it's pretty profound.
And I have to say a little anecdote. So Dan came to my house and he stayed with us as we were working with one of the subjects in our film. And we were sitting at my breakfast table one morning and we were talking about all this. And I started sharing a little bit about some nightmares, some recurring nightmares I had over the last number of years. And it was related to a work-related incident with a former employer. And I would have these nightmares 2 or 3 times a week. And it's for the last, 10 years. And as we sat at the breakfast table, Dan made a believer out of me because he started taking me through some of these protocols. And in 20 minutes, we were done. And I have to say, on my honor, I have not had a nightmare since. It was unbelievable. I was like, Dan, you're going to put some people out of business with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's bringing healing, and it's bringing help, and it's bringing wholeness. It's bringing a peaceful night's sleep to people who haven't had it in a long time. And if you watch our film, you see a bit of that process. We couldn't dive into it, the whole thing, but we see a little bit of that. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for helping me through that process.
So, Conrad, that's called the memory reconsolidation. That's what happens when you neurologically disconnect the emotions. The brain starts processing emotions. So there's a few things that happen, especially in the first responder world. What alcohol, right? That's our go-to. That was my go-to in the Army. Was you get so anxious and so wound up that you drink because it's a central nervous system depressant and it calms you, but then you never process because you never hit REM sleep, or you're prescribed medications that are designed to be REM sleep blockers. Well, that's the fox guarding the hen house. You're not allowed to process emotions if you're not hitting REM sleep. What we do forces that. And when that REM sleep happens, the brain is equipped to heal itself. So we tell everyone we work with, it's not us, right? This is just a process. We're teaching your brain how to disconnect those emotions. And I scratch my head every time I see it, because I've worked personally probably with about 500 people. Now, the key is they've got to be outside of their trauma, right? The trauma can't be an ongoing event. But once you're outside of that trauma and you've got clearly defined beginning and end points, we call bookends, you literally can go right to that amygdala where that fight or flight opens and disconnect it. And when that amygdala releases that neural pathway, the memory and the emotion also releases the neural pathway, and the reconsolidation happens.
It's amazing. It's an amazing process. And I'm so glad that we were able to show that, highlight that in the film. And so I want to bring everyone back in. Everyone's still here. I think Maddie had to duck out, but I'm going to bring everyone back into the room and see if I can add everybody. Got a room full of people. Thank you all for being here and for, in one way or another, being a part of the film and supporting it and sharing. I just want to get everybody together and say, where do you see this going from here? I mean, I know where I want to take it, but let me hear from you guys. What would you like to see this film accomplish out there in the world?
I'll go ahead and start. So I would like to see this to be mandatory viewing in all law enforcement and fire academies. Let people understand at the very front end of their careers that there's going to be some real issues and struggles to deal with, but that there's actually hope.
Thank you.
I would definitely concur with that. That's what we'll be doing at the Garland Police Department. It'll be shown to the police recruits and the lateral transfers. And also, I hope it'll be shown at the Citizens Police Academies. So the regular citizens that are coming through will get to see it. Just the impact of awareness, raising awareness, both in-house and out in the community. That's where I want to see it going. And I believe it's relevant now. And this film will be relevant 10 years from now to accomplish that.
And I think to kind of build on that and what everyone else has said about the impact and what the issues are is we all in this country and state by state, and what Samantha was saying about the laws and the lawmakers, we need better access and easier access to mental health and brain health. Our mental health and accessing a therapist should not be shameful, first of all, but it also shouldn't be something that people don't have access to because they can't afford it, or any other reason. So I'm hoping that, that will be something that comes out of this, is realizing like we need to have more therapists that know how to work culturally competent with our first responders. We need to have access where it is affordable, where it's easy to get to, where you're not on a waiting list, and include the family members of our first responders, because it comes home with him and we share a household. And even with my work, which is less traumatizing, we definitely, are impacted by what happens at work every day. So those are sort of some of my top level thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else? Samantha?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and echo exactly what's been said. I think now it is the perfect time. It needs to be in every department because the conversations need to happen. The walls need to come down, and it needs to be in the communities, whether it's pushed through the mayor's office, the local DA, whatever that looks like, so that the community can engage as well.
So, Doc, a little bit of what Dan was sharing, with, or I think maybe Dan, maybe Todd as well, about having it in the academies. That's kind of that, before the bang, right?
Left of bang.
Yeah,
That's
left of bang. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's needed. There's no doubt. And look, what everyone said here is just brilliant and it's spot on. And just to add to that, if there's anything else, it would be the conversation needs to take place from the top. The top needs to recognize that vulnerability starts with them, that authenticity starts with them, because they're the decision makers, And so being able to have a real raw, authentic insight into how this affects their guys and girls is so important.
My desire from the very beginning, I think Nancy can concur, was we want to make a difference. We want to make a difference in the lives of our first responders, because I believe that we as citizens need to help take care of our first responders. They take care of us. So we need to do that in return. And I want to make a difference in how citizens view first responders. I think there has been a lack of understanding, really, of how, you're driving down the interstate, you see a terrible accident, and you go, oh, wow, look at that crazy, that car's all messed up. Well, there's human beings that were messed up in that car, and now there's other human beings that have to take care of that mess. And these days, whenever I see that, or I see a bad fire, or I see a news story, my first thoughts are now, oh my goodness, those first responders, what they had to deal with. That's my very first thought. And that's what I want our citizens to begin thinking. Wow, these first responders on scene, they had to deal with this. And not only those on scene physically, but those in the call centers who took the call. And I think that's an aspect of. So I want to ask Nancy, when we first started working on that, were 911 dispatchers, were they in your idea of first responders? Let's see if I can. Oh, there.
There.
There you go.
So the answer is no. My previous film about PTSD and the impact on Vietnam veterans was a completely different ball of wax. And I had never thought about first responders in the way that I think about them now because of this film. And when we first talked, I thought, wow, this is going to be an impactful film. It's something that's important to explore. It's something that I don't know about. And if I don't know about, other people don't know about it. And I think that the 3 years that we've been working on this has opened my eyes in a way that is astounding. The depth and the level of change that needs to occur, and the impact that all of these people and the ripple effects of the impact on their lives that I was not aware of make me so committed to bringing this story to the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm really excited for the possibility of having this in theaters around the country. And so we're working with Fathom Events, and Fathom has around 1,200 theaters around the country where they have events. It'll likely, if we get this, it'll be like a 2-night event where people can buy a ticket, just like you're going to a movie theater, get your thing of popcorn and your candy, and go sit down and with your family, with your loved ones, and watch this film. So if you are a person of faith and of the praying kind, pray that they say yes. We are hoping to hear from them in the next month or so. And once we do, then we're going to need you to help us. We need everyone out there to spread the word, to get this grassroots thing going of spreading the word and getting people into the theater to see this. And so we want to get it out to as many people, and to Nancy's point, to get as many people to see this that are not in the first responder community. But we also want first responders to see this, I think, and specifically leaders. We are working right now on an event that's possibly going to be at the U.S. Capitol sometime in the spring. And so working with an organization that's making some calls, and we hope to have it at the U.S. Capitol in the Congressional Theater for members of Congress sometime this spring. And so we will let you know when that is, when that happens. We're also bringing it to a number of conferences and events around the country. The first responder, I think, will be at the FOP Wellness Summit in late January in Nashville, as well as some other events around the country. I know the people in San Diego at the, I get the acronym wrong, but it's the it's the Peer Support. It's a Public Safety Peer Support Association. Yeah, PSPSA are going to have us out there, as well as a bunch of other organizations, and even working with an organization in Wisconsin who has a film festival. And they're interested in bringing this film there. So if you would like to have this film in your area, please go to our website and fill out the form on our website to get the information, and we will send that right over to you. In fact, when you fill out the form now, you will be sent a link to download the information sheet for the screening. So please do that, and you will get that information in your hot little hands, so you know how to put together a screening event. And my assistant, Carrie, will help with that. All of you played a big role in the film in one way or another. Samantha, you aren't in the film, but you have been a supporter and an encourager all along. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate every one of you as being a part of this project. And I can't believe that it's already almost a week since we premiered it. It's hard to believe. I do want to say a quick shout out to our best dressed couple, Todd and Becky. Todd and Becky were kind enough to arrange a limousine for our crew, and I want to quickly show you a photo of that if I can find it. Let's see here. Here we are. Let's see here. Pull this up right here. Yeah. So some of our film stars, as we called them, were able to come in a limo, and so it was really fun to have them show up in the limo and be a part of that, and be transported in style to the event. And so thank you, Todd and Becky, for providing that. I want to give you a shout out for that. So that was fantastic. And I know our film subjects really appreciated that in a big way. So thank you.
Really the least we could do. Thank y'all for all of your hard work in making this film happen.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen the photos, go to our website, go to our Facebook page, rather, a PTSD 911 movie, and check out the Facebook page. And if you haven't liked our Facebook page, what are you waiting on? Go ahead and like it. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, because we are going to continue the conversation. We're going to continue these conversations with leaders from around the country, perhaps even around the world, in the first responder community and the wellness space. So tune in again very shortly for another program in the next week or two. We will continue this conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And so we're going to bring on some other people over the next couple of months to have this conversation. And as we bring the film to your neck of the woods, we'll have the conversation in person. So I look forward to doing that. For all of you, for being here, for Dan, for Phil, Nancy, Todd, Becky, and Sam, Samantha, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you are doing. Be well, be healthy, and stay strong. All of you. And don't check out yet. I'm going to end the broadcast and then we can wrap up offline. Good night, everyone.